What I want to get into today is a video on the importance of not putting all your eggs in one basket socially, as far as friends, business-wise, as far as opportunities, or even as far as your dating life or romantic relationships. And if you are going to put your eggs in one basket, then what I'm also going to cover is what that means and getting you to really audit the consequences that has in your life. I'm going to do a contrast here. I want you to imagine you at your absolute best. Everything in your life is just clicking. You feel supremely confident to the point that you walk into any environment needing nothing because everything in your life is handled. Let's say there's someone who you'd like to go talk to or network with or to attract. You have no nerves about it because you already know lots of other people like them. Why would you be nervous? And because of that, you're completely relaxed and you wind up expressing yourself in a relaxed, calm way that really reflects the amazing person that you are. Imagine you're talking to a business partner and they become a little bit irate. Maybe they act poorly and they're really just being bad to you. And you look at them and you say, hey, you know what? I really hope that we can work this out. I'll tell you what, you seem a little bit heated. I'm going to go grab a bite. Let's talk later. And hopefully we can work it out. And then as you leave, the person who's your business partner or coworker thinks to themselves, wow, they don't need to be here. They probably could be making more money doing other things. And for that reason, I better shape up. Imagine what that would be like, as opposed to perhaps the situation that you're in right now, where maybe you have a boss, and if your boss might fire you, you're nervous, extremely nervous. Or maybe you're a business owner, and a particular customer is what's called a lead customer, which is a customer who is basically sucking more energy than any finance that they're bringing in. And you're just scrambling to keep them on board and keep them happy, and they're sucking the life out of you. Imagine that you're in a romantic relationship and your partner is just pushing and pushing and pushing on that boundary to the point that you don't even know who you are anymore. You don't respect yourself anymore. And on one hand, if that's the only person that you're able to meet, then you just beg them not to get mad at you. You beg them and you throw yourself on the ground, meeting any demand that they have, which of course they'll give many demands. And then you give into those demands, they stay with you, but guess what? They don't respect you anymore. They've lost attraction for you. Conversely, imagine a situation where you say to your romantic partner, hey, you know what? You're amazing. I love you. You're incredible. I'll tell you what, I'm so sorry that we've had this problem. And why don't we just cool off for a minute and we'll figure it out later. And in that moment, your partner realizes you're happy to work it out. You're loving, you're a good person, and you're supportive. And you're understanding of where they're coming from. But at the same time, if they mess around too much, they're going to lose you. What does that do? Well, let me explain clearly what that will do when you have that. In effect, what it does is it triggers something called the halo effect. The halo effect is something that's triggered where the person's selective focus, their reticular activation system, or RAS, look that up, their selective focus is focusing on your better qualities because they know that they could lose you. Conversely, you can have almost an anti-halo effect. We call that an RAS flip, where instead of focusing on all the amazing things that you have to offer, or even looking at you in a neutral or balanced or fair way, they actually start taking you for granted, and they start essentially nitpicking any little thing that they can in order to not appreciate you. That's pretty crazy, right? So let's look at both situations here. On one level, you have what's called abundance, and you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And on another level, you have what's called scarcity, where in effect, people are giving you marching orders on what is okay and what is not okay. They are literally telling you how to run your life. And funny enough, the more that you bend over or throw yourself at their feet or let them walk all over you, the less they appreciate you. And ironically, they usually wind up leaving in the end anyway. So rather than doing what most people do and say, oh, that's Fred. Oh, that's the juice. Oh, that's some food. Oh, that's a tree. What I'd like you to realize is that essentially we live in an ecosystem where everything is taking energy from everything else. And in effect, what you're doing is you're either engaging with something, either a food, a person, a business, a relationship, an environment, whatever it is. You're either engaging with something that is synergistic and you're both going up. That's called a win-win. Or you're engaging in something called a win-lose where you're benefiting and someone else is losing, or they're winning and you're losing. So an example of an area that you're winning and other people are losing, in my view, would be all the plastic that we throw into the environment. Now, I may be mistaken about this, and there's a lot of different opinions on it. I've heard them. So maybe it's actually completely fine that we just throw plastic everywhere. But for the most part, we eat foods in plastic, and then we throw it out, winds up in the ocean, some dolphins running around with some weird six-pack plastic thing jammed down its air hole. You never even have to see it. It suffers, it dies, or brutally feels pain. And meanwhile, you go on with your life without thinking about it. Funny, right? Now, in the same way, though, we've got to wonder to ourselves, where's the area where you're struggling and you're just having the life sucked out of you, and the other person who's benefiting is probably not thinking much about it, right? We got to be thinking about that. When you eat a steak, do you really think a lot about that cow that you're eating? Or do you just eat it down, take the energy, and get on with your day? I'm not a vegetarian myself, but I'm using this as an example. So where are areas that this is being done to you? Now, one of the first places that this was brought to my attention, I talked about this in a video about poison dripping I shot in Houston, Texas in about 2014. It was brought to my attention, a friend of mine who's this amazing guy who is addicted to heroin. And what he said to me, because I asked him, why do you do it? What got you doing the heroin? And he said, Owen, the heroin just takes from you. And I'm like, what do you mean heroin takes from you? Why do you do it if it takes from you? He goes, Owen, you start off and it gives to you. You feel so good. You feel warm, like you're in this warm blanket of safety. It's incredible. But eventually it just takes and it takes and it takes and it takes. And I found this to be very fascinating, this idea that heroin as an entity could be put in you. At first, it gives you something, which then makes you get addicted to it. And then later, once you're addicted, it just takes and takes and takes. Maybe the dealer is making money. That's why a lot of dealers will give a free sample right off the bat or even peer pressure you to do it. Then you've done it, you get addicted to it, and then they could just start taking from you. It's very shocking, actually, how this happens. Now, the key aspect in heroin that you have to keep in mind is that at first it makes you feel really good, but then eventually as it takes from you, what it does is it actually poison drips away your faculties so that you can't think clearly, you can't act in a way that would benefit you, and in effect, you can't live your life. And once you can't live your life properly, you can't get a job anymore, you look kind of like a freak because your face is all messed up, your body's all messed up, you're basically on this downward spiral, you've got nothing left. And if you have nothing left, what are you going to do? You're probably going to go do more heroin. There's just nothing else left. You could argue the same thing in a lesser degree about, say, processed foods. You just start eating the processed foods until you're fat, you're sick. You don't have the motivation to go get out into nature, a place like Yosemite here. There's not really a lot of passion left in you. You don't have the energy to make money, to even come to a place like this, or the desire or will. Probably you just feel numb to life. You're eating too many processed foods, maybe drinking alcohol. And so as a result of that, the only thing that can make you happy is those processed foods. You see that? Eat processed foods on the front end. Some of them can taste very good. I know you'll say they don't. I actually think a lot of them do because they have high fructose corn syrup and it hits almost every part of your taste bud. It's very strong. You're like, this is good for some of it. If you have a more refined palate, maybe you learned otherwise. But if you don't, it tastes really good. What if you're also broke and you're not able to afford fine organic food? And then someone gives you that. It's amazing. But then what it does is it starts sucking the life out of you. It's crazy how this works. It basically gives you something on the front end and then sucks the life out of you. Sadly, in disgusting abusive relationships such as pimps with prostitutes, you see this where they say, oh, me and you against the world. I'm going to take you to the end of the rainbow. And they wind up sending them out on some little mission to make money. And at first they give them money and maybe they're on the up and up. Later, they may begin to disgustingly abuse them and get it to where they've actually lost their sense of self-esteem. If you've ever looked at an abuse victim, it's disgusting. And essentially what happens is that the person on the front end, in say a romantic relationship or even in that pimp relationship, essentially what happens is that on the front end, they're so nice, they're so friendly. And then they get all this value. It feels amazing, it's great. And then slowly but surely, as the person becomes addicted on the other person, they take something. They kind of, come at them in a way that could hurt them physically or emotionally. And then what happens is that the person loses their sense of self-esteem, because here's the key. Self-esteem is like a bowl. This is actually quite weird what I'm going to say here, so I'd ask you to bear with me. Self-esteem is like a bowl, and the bowl itself is a boundary, and actually the self-esteem is like the water inside the bowl. So what happens is if somebody goes past your boundaries, they're treating you in a way that's inhuman or wrong. What happens is it puts a little crack in the bowl, and the self-esteem goes out. But what happens is, what if you're dependent on that other person for your self-esteem? What if you have a new romantic partner and you really love them and you're dependent on them? Well, you have so much great history together, so many great intimate experiences, emotional experiences. You have such hope for that relationship. You don't want to give up on it. How would you possibly give up on that amazing relationship? You had such high hopes for it. You'd spoken about all these great ideas, these great moments. If you were to leave, it would almost ruin or take away from or sour those beautiful moments that you had together. You have such great hope. So you allow a boundary to be broken. But then what happens when the boundary's broken, guess what? They now have more power to do that again, because now you don't feel as happy within yourself. Your happiness is dependent on that person. So now they can do it again, either emotionally, physically, whatever. A lot of it's emotional. It's actually can be very subtle, very, very subtle. So that happens again. And what winds up happening is that it lowers your self-esteem even more. And now you need them even more. It creates a dependence, right? Just like the drug, where at first the drug you feel so good, you go flying through life. You might even be accomplishing more. But over time, it actually starts hurting you. It starts to abuse you. And then eventually the drug is all that you have left. That's the major key here, is that when you have all your eggs in one basket, you get hooked in on these things, right? Or maybe you started off with many different eggs, and then you get hooked on this one, and it takes away from you. And it actually ruins all those other opportunities that you have. So you've got to be very, very aware of that. I've mentioned that I've had this experience in business where I've had somebody who I'm working with, and I have many different people that I'm working with, and I may double down on that one person, triple down, quadruple down. And it gets to the point where at first it's so productive. I have so many hopes for that business relationship. But over time, they recognize that they completely have their grip on me, and there's nothing that I can do. I've had it where staff members have demanded a raise of triple or quadruple the amount of money. And because I was so happy with them, I didn't have any other backup staff. I wasn't looking for any other alternatives. And I might have spent 2-3 years training them on that one job. And if I don't quadruple their salary, they leave. It could take me years to put somebody else in that position. Plus, I care about the friendship aspect. I feel bad about it. And from that point, I've definitely had it where they could start to become very emotionally abusive, make threats, make all sorts of threats, or even act on those threats. In business, sometimes they call that a black box, where in effect, you have one person who can literally have the keys to your entire business. There's been a lot of people who have felt that way about even things online. There's a lot of monopolies that exist online. And those monopolies provide services to business. So you wind up having such a great relationship with them for the first 5 or 10 years of that service, that monopoly service on the internet. You've had such an incredible relationship. It's almost like romantic. You love them. And then they get to the point where your entire business is running through them, because you might have your own website, and then you realize, why would I even keep a website? I can do commerce directly off of this platform. I can get all the viewers that I need through here. Why am I going to go set up my own, my own video portal or something like that? Why would I go do that? That's crazy. This is a readily made solution right here. Why would I change anything? Why would I go start funneling cold traffic into my video portal where I have to pay for bandwidth? I have to pay for those leads to go to the video portal. Those leads are far more expensive to generate than if I just go on a platform. And so you start off like that. But then at that point, now that platform can set the rules. What is it that you can say, what you can't say, and so on and so forth. And so what happens is that at first, offer value. Then it creates a monopoly. Everybody's using it. And now it can dictate the terms. And you have a generation of creators walking on eggshells. Now, of course, those creators love that platform, would practically jump off a building for the platform, but they're confused. They're just literally left confused what to do. And then they see all these other issues coming up with it, and it's frankly terrifying. So there's things like that that can happen. I've also seen it like I mentioned, in my own business, where I put all my time into one business, and I say, you know what? Why would I work with anybody else when this is going so well? I want to keep doubling and tripling down on this. And what winds up happening is I'm sitting there in a basic conversation. I can't even get basic respect. And here's why. In evolution, in effect, here's where all of this comes from, okay? we're not just Fred or Mr. Tree or Fido the dog. We are, in effect, my understanding, and it's very loose here, but you'll get the general idea, the functional idea, is we're basically these like carbon-based life forms. And the carbon-based life form wants to survive and reproduce. You can read the book The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And that life force will, in effect, adapt based on evolutionary pressure. So believe it or not, even something like being basically polite, in many ways, actually comes from evolutionary pressure. That may shock you. That may shock you what I'm saying, but this is very important that you keep this in your mind because what I'm saying is very shocking. I want you to think of many married couples where one person in the couple no longer wants to be intimate with the other person. They're like, hey, take out the trash. They may browbeat them emotionally. In many ways, arousal, even arousal to be intimate with a partner can come down to knowing that perhaps they have other options and could leave. And so just to generate arousal in and of itself, think about this for a moment, that actually takes time and energy to just generate the basic level of arousal. If the body, that entity, that evolutionary entity, knows that the partner is going to stay there, no matter what, there's no way out, that body may not generate arousal. Well, what happens then? Then the other partner feels unloved, which lowers their self-esteem. It breaks their boundaries, makes them more and more ineffective a loser, in effect, right? I hate to say it, but that's kind of what it is. And then what happens is by the end of it, they have nothing left. They couldn't even go out and meet somebody new because they've lost all their swagger. There's no fun to them, no hipness. They've lost their swagger. It's pretty crazy how that happens. Likewise, just for basic politeness, that may sound shocking to you, but let me ask you this. Are you really polite to everybody? Are you? Now, what if Hugh Hefner was still alive and you could have gone to, say, the mansion, right? The Hugh Hefner mansion. And you could have been at the best party in all of Los Angeles or all the world. How polite would you be to Hugh Hefner? Would you have been like, hello, Mr. Hefner, thank you so much for inviting me to your fine mansion here. Wow. I mean, I got to be honest with you. When I'm running a seminar, just being honest, people are incredibly polite to me. You think that I don't know that they are probably not that polite to everybody else? And I've seen this for many years because maybe I make a new hire and you see how polite somebody is and giving and enthusiastic on the front end. But eventually, once they've learned kind of what they want to learn from you, or maybe they have, they may see other business opportunities, or frankly, you might have spent years helping them to build a brand. They don't really need you anymore. And so what happens at that point is that evolution shifts. In effect, what's going to happen is their DNA, it changes the halo effect. The halo effect completely switches. They have an RAS flip. You've heard me talk about it here in other videos, recently recorded. And they have that RAS flip, and they realize they can be rude. They realize that they can take or do, frankly, whatever they want. At that point, again, what's going to happen? It shifts the investment ratio. Now you're investing more. What do we do as human beings? We value that which we invest in, right? If we've invested in something, we don't want to have a sunk cost. So we panic if we might lose the time and energy into that investment. We get pulled into a rut here, do you see? So understand that the basic ability for someone to even be polite to you or to find a win-win or to be synergistic with you, it depends on them knowing that you have other options. Take it from me. I mean, take it from me. I've had incredible romantic partners, amazing people I've worked with, people that if you saw them, you'd just be like, wow, these people are amazing. But I've seen the shift in what can happen when all your eggs are in one basket. I've seen it flat out. Once you understand that this is evolutionary, once you understand that, in effect, the person who's acting like this is being evolutionary driven to do so. In the same way that if I put a steak in front of you, you're going to feel hungry. If I go find someone who's very attractive and I put them in front of you, you're going to feel arousal. If I keep you awake all day for 16, 18 hours, you're going to feel sleepy. Well, in the same way, the evolutionary system that's in us basically functions that we're not going to exert any more energy than we have to. So if we know that we have that person stuck there with us, it is actually harder to treat them with basic respect. And in doing so, if we're their only option, they may wind up giving too much, really just giving too much of themselves, foregoing all their other opportunities, and really shrinking. And it becomes one of those situations where, you're taking the plastic, throwing the ocean, and some dolphin suffering. You're doing that to someone else. Or, again, where are the places that people are doing that to you? Once you get this, you can really begin to audit your life and start to set up your life in a way where all these little situations that you're in, everybody you're relating with, it's feeding you energy, as I've mentioned. And once you're doing that, that puts you in a position to be incredibly grounded. I personally, like I mentioned, like to combine a lot of inner work, spiritual work, and really just, getting present to the moment and getting at peace with yourself. But I also believe that we live in a physical world. And so while it is important to accept ourselves, because in the end we're going to die, so we have to understand that we're bigger than just physical reality, because we're going to lose that too. At the same time, we are a part of a physical world right here, right now. And so we really want to audit this, understand it, and set up our lives in a way where we find a lot of win-wins. So going back on it, just to summarize, like we said, human beings are essentially a bag for DNA, which is typically trying to suck time and energy off of other entities to benefit itself. So in effect, I've covered this in other videos, what happens is the mind is having thoughts, and the DNA, being very selfish, actually hijacks the person's mind and gives them selfish thoughts and allows them to rationalize this. The way that we do this, like I talked about earlier, we talked about the halo effect, we talk about reticular activation system. In effect, what happens is that using RAS, selective focus, again, look that up if you haven't, what winds up happening is that the person can rationalize selfish thoughts for themselves. The majority of people who you're talking to, different opinions that they have, is pretty much fueled by what is in their self-interest or in their ego self-interest or some kind of social conditioning that's been force-fed down their throat, which they're not conscious of. And you, in large part, are a great deal like this yourself. And the more that you become aware of it and awake, the more that you can actually reclaim some of that consciousness and have independent thought or thought that comes from within or maybe some higher power, which is pretty amazing. So that being the case, let's look at how actually this social conditioning is sucking from you. Because in effect, there's a collectivist social conditioning, and then you as an individual, you can benefit in some ways because if the collective is doing well, then you benefit by being a part of that collective, right? Like if society's nice, if you're, you have beautiful roads, beautiful, we're sitting at Yosemite, that's a beautiful park system. That is created from collectivist social conditioning. There's a lot of good in that. Tremendous good comes from collectivism. But at the same time, there's also the individual side, which is you. And this is very interesting because in our subject matter, we talk a lot about how to be attractive, how to be high status. And generally speaking, to kind of separate yourself from the pack, you may be called upon to see things a little bit differently than in, say, collectivist conditioning, right? If we look at collectivist conditioning, they say, just be yourself, be a nice guy, work hard, be honest. That's very basic conditioning. I believe in all that. I think you should be nice. I think that you should work hard. I think that you should be yourself and whatnot. I think that's amazing, but it's not necessarily sufficient for somebody to do well in life. And certainly in my own case, when I was trying to improve with, say, my dating life or love life or romance life, that kind of thinking, it really led me down a wrong path because I thought, I'm working hard. I'm going to a great school. I'm a nice guy. I'm being myself. Why can't I meet somebody? That conditioning didn't work for me. So I've covered this a lot, in huge detail in programs like the Blueprint Decoded and others that you might have seen, this idea of societal conditioning. And this conditioning, which I've covered, has actually, in recent years, gotten a lot deeper. I've made some allusion to it earlier in this video with some of the topics that might have surprised you. So, in effect, what's happening is that technology is expanding. And so with technology, what can happen is that same effect where something offers value up front until you're hooked and then it can set the terms, that's actually happening on mass scale right now. So there's everything that there's all these different things that you would never think of, but and we're going to get very, very nuanced here. That this is very difficult and dense. So we're going to really bite off some ideas here. In effect, what you have is everything from payment processors to web hosting to platforms to banks to communication devices to apps that you could use and things like that. And these are things that are now so widely used, like credit cards. They're so widely used that in order to function in society, you need these things. If you can't have, say, a credit card or a payment processor like, say, PayPal, or access to a platform, while you may have liberty that's given to you by the government if you live in a free country, these technologies, in effect, you depend on them, right? And so these are incredible technologies. And what happens is, as you start using them, who wouldn't be pulled in? But in effect, what can then happen is exactly what I've talked about. Once those technologies have you pulled in, they can then begin to set the terms. Now, what this means, in effect, is that what you're allowed to say and what you're allowed to think will be dictated by these technologies. You might have read the book 1984 by George Orwell. They call that wrongthink. And in effect, what happens is what you're allowed to think and say is, they call this the Overton window, the range of acceptable thinking. That will now be dictated in effect by corporations. So this becomes very interesting because corporations, in effect, may have a type of conditioning that doesn't benefit you. For example, collectivist conditioning. So very, very interesting, right? So let's think about this for a minute, right? When you have people and you look at status, essentially what you have is a pyramid, okay? So the pyramid is that the bulk of the people are at the bottom of the pyramid. And then a very, very small number of people are at the top of the pyramid. For example, I can shoot a basketball, a two-pointer, perhaps get the odd three-pointer, but then, somebody like Kobe Bryant or Stephen Curry, they're very rare. They're at the top of the pyramid, right? So people with very high abilities, they become rarer and rarer. Stronger people become rarer and rarer. So what's happened with social media, and this is going way further down the rabbit hole of our social conditioning, is in social media, the people now at the bottom of the pyramid actually can reach out to each other, and in effect, they can make their demands. Now, their demands typically are going to be very collectivist thinking, and typically anybody at the at a higher level, they probably want to bring that down to whatever extent. So, in effect, we see this in collectivist economic systems versus individualistic economic systems, right? And so, typically, in an individualistic one, they're building something, and that has great value. But if you get a collectivist economic system where the people at the bottom of the pyramid can say, hey, we just want to take that from you, well, then that can actually disincentivize the people at the top from continuing to do that. They just take it, and then in many cases, it can get messed up. In other cases, it actually could work well. There's cases where, a government could take over a certain service, and that can actually work very well. There's a lot of counterexamples to this. So we don't need to get into politics or take a side politically here. I just want you to understand the conditioning. Let's stay away from the politics. Let's just go into the conditioning aspect. So in effect, many of the different conditionings that have already been very bad through, say, the 90s, early 2000s, just like be yourself, be a nice person, and that's it. Your whole life's going to work perfect, which basically is just designed to make nobody ever think for themselves or, step out of in any way have independent thought and basically just be like a good little drone and serving the system. That's going to get a lot more aggressive going into the future. And here's why. What has happened is that businesses, which in effect are created by individuals, are, basically accept money from the larger collective, from the masses. Do you understand? This is important what I'm telling you. Let's say that you run a business. Probably your business is accepting money from the masses, right? So the masses gives money to your business. Well, let's say that a big group of them get together on social media and they start complaining about something that bothers them. What bothers them? Probably some, better way of thinking about things. It probably bothers them. Well, if they complain about that to that service, let's say it's a tech company, then that tech company must respond because they depend on those people and then say, okay, nobody's allowed to think like that anymore, talk like that anymore. Fair enough. So once that's occurred, now, let's say, for example, Martin Luther King, if this was back in the day, Martin Luther King back in the day, if he lived today, because he was outside of the Overton window at that time, the pressure from him on corporations would have been the case where he basically couldn't even function. Okay, he basically would have been shut down in a lot of very powerful ways, which is such a shame because many of these ideas that move society forward, Martin Luther King's a hero of mine, many of these ideas that move society forward now are not going to be able to move us forward because of the fact that, in effect, businesses rely on the collective for money, and now the collective through social media, in effect, can make demands of the business. Very, very interesting. Now, add to this, there's another element or layer to this that's quite fascinating. If you read the book Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck, what you'll read is that we go through these different paradigms. And an orange paradigm is typically a very business-focused paradigm. And typically when you become extremely wealthy, you hit this next paradigm called a green paradigm, okay? It's called the green meme. And what winds up happening is that you kind of become very sympathetic to other people because, in effect, you've made all this money, you've got piles of cash, and you start to feel guilty for having cash because you feel like everybody else is suffering. Well, this is sort of a weird thing because the act of entrepreneurship itself is meant to be it's thought of in a selfish light, but it's actually meant to be cleansing to the spirit. It forces you, it's the ultimate self-help course, okay? Becoming an entrepreneur will force you to look at yourself and examine yourself in so many ways. And if you just hand somebody free things, you're robbing them of the experience of their DNA kicking in and hitting its potential. The biggest way that I can hurt you is to give you free money. That is the most violent thing that I can do to you, because your DNA is never going to wake up into its survival reproduction mode and actually start hitting into those higher paradigms of your mind, into better understandings, more complex understandings, into becoming the best version of yourself that you can be. So to an extent, if someone's really suffering, then yes, they may need some money. They may need some help. But if you deprive, in a case where someone is really in jeopardy, right? And that's what a social safety net is for. But if it goes too much, where the money is free handed to you, there's countless instances of this, and this is well established. Anybody who knows anything knows this. In effect, what happens is it demotivates people. The person that I've had to become through entrepreneurship in this kind of like survival mode, it's unbelievable the amount that I've been forced to evolve. And so what winds up happening is that in the conditioning, as more is handed to people in the collective, they're now they're not forced to be confronted with any ideas that would challenge them, like to step up or to not be a victim. They're not forced to be challenged because they can say they're being triggered, but then in addition and offended. But then in addition to that, if they're getting more money, then they don't even have an incentive to improve. So there's less incentive to improve, and they're not going to have their beliefs questioned. Why would they even want to have their beliefs questioned when they're getting free money, and so on and so forth? So I've done about a 6 out of 10 job of explaining this, okay? I'm kind of just knocking it out to you here in a quick video. And at some point, maybe I'll make a more detailed analysis of this. Unfortunately, getting too far into it can actually cause problems. So we have this going on, and we've seen this phenomenon happening. And the result of it, in effect, is going to be very, very brutal social conditioning, to where the social conditioning that's created is actually sucking the life out of you. So understand that this is going to go on. This has been basically going on in society with collectivist conditioning. Just be yourself, be your best self. Like what be yourself should be is cultivate yourself into your best self, figure out all these incredible potentials that you have, and then bring that to the table. But just be yourself. Essentially, what it's saying is don't elevate yourself. Just work your little corporate job. Don't have a better voice. Don't take up any more space. Just be a good little battery for the collective. This conditioning, which we see in everything from corporations to collectivist conditioning, that really messed up a lot of people looking to become more attractive for many years, and that's why we covered this so much in detail. What I've covered here is the further societal conditioning, which, because of the scalability of technology and the incredible value that it can offer, it offers so much value, right? Or these new emerging markets from other countries that may have different values. In effect, the conditioning, what you're going to see is it's going to become very much the case where it's going to be offering you a lot. Like your life will depend on it. But if in any way, shape, or form you have a thought that falls outside of how they feel you should think and something that you feel would benefit yourself, well, then that's going to be a pretty big deal. So what we've basically done is we've covered a ton about that which gives to you and which can take. We've covered it from a relationship perspective. We've covered it from a perspective of being attractive. We've covered it from a perspective of money and business. We've even now covered it from a perspective of social conditioning. And this is probably one of the more interesting parts of the video. And a lot of these ideas could be new to you, okay? They could be very new and a little bit hard to digest. I understand that. Don't judge them for now. Just let them digest, okay? I'm probably not going to talk a ton further on it, but I just want to kind of draw your attention to this stuff, okay? Just be aware of it. Again, it might sound surprising to you, but if you actually look at my background, what I've been through, I've seen some things up close that would shock you, and come out the other side of it having to really elevate myself. So I'm going to go eat. Allow me to enjoy a nice meal here with my children, and I'll wake up tomorrow, and then we're going to go on a final rant about the potential that I see in you. Good morning. This is almost like we just had a one-night encounter, and then we've woken up in bed together the next morning and are like, what's up? Now, what we're going to go into next is basically breaking down the law of down-regulation. What is that? Well, the major theme that we've been talking about in our discussion so far is that typically what happens is that on the front end, you get some kind of value, and then because you like the value that you're getting, you like the way something makes you feel, you'll tend to not keep up your skills or effort in that area because it's providing something for you. And then that aspect of yourself begins to downregulate. What are some examples of that? Well, A lot of people would say that if you take steroids, you're not going to produce as much natural testosterone anymore because the steroids is producing it for you. Likewise, if you were to do illicit drugs such as cocaine or MDMA, cocaine can actually downregulate, at least by my understanding, your dopamine production, and MDMA can actually downregulate your serotonin production. The reason why is because cocaine overfloods the brain with dopamine, and so your brain says, oh, we don't need that anymore. Start downregulating it. Likewise with MDMA, your brain says, oh, we don't need serotonin anymore. Starts downregulating it. These are contentious statements that I'm making in all three that I've mentioned, and some people would have a different opinion. I would also argue that cell phone usage, as people walk around all day, actually downregulates their ability to control their own emotions. They basically get dopamine spikes from it, and they don't know how to control their emotions anymore. And likewise, I'd say alcohol use, when people go to bars and clubs in order to have fun, the average person drinking alcohol at a bar or club, they've lost their ability to self-generate positivity or good emotions or being carefree, right? Like going out and being fun and carefree, there's a process to that. And you've got to actually be quite meticulous to have that process. When I go out and I'm socializing, there's a very, very specific process that I'm using to get myself in that fun mood. And if I were to just start drinking, it does it for me. And then what happens is that my ability to do that for myself, in effect, it downregulates. Okay, so that's the basic idea of the law of downregulation. And you can see it if you take melatonin pills and all of a sudden your body's not producing melatonin to go to sleep. You can see it if you drink too much coffee or tea and you can't get alert on your own because your body is downregulating those aspects of yourself. So notice that this can be a chemical in your body that actually downregulates, or a hormone in your body that downregulates, or simply an ability, something that you were putting time and energy into that downregulates. Now, a major one that I've seen in that light is also the idea of producing charisma. And that's a very, very fascinating topic right there. Because in effect, let's say that you get into a relationship and you're getting what I would call charisma-free intimacy, okay? Charisma-free intimacy, or you don't need to be an alpha anymore in order to get intimacy. And so what happens, funny enough, is that your charisma actually begins to downregulate. Why do I say that? Well, look, to be highly charismatic, to be funny, to crack jokes, all that kind of stuff, that's a real effort in order to do that. I can tell you, I've spent a lot of my life just learning how to have all sorts of little funny quips and to be witty and to be sharp. And there's a certain amount of mental or emotional energy that goes into that. Or how about into maintaining fashion and style, or to just maintaining the ability to go and engage with people, to open up conversations that can feel a little bit awkward to do. Like I mentioned earlier, how about going out to a bar or club and maintaining that ability just to be fun and generate your own positive emotions without alcohol? There's an energy that goes into that. Likewise, just maintaining that ability to be centered and to be an alpha. There's a huge amount of energy that goes into that. Being an alpha, it does make life easier. It's a good thing to do. But I wouldn't call it easy. It's not something that happens on its own. So if you're getting your physical needs met from your partner, and you don't have to be alpha, or you don't have to be charismatic, or you don't have to put the effort into self-amusing or meeting new people, well, generally speaking, that alphaness or charisma is going to downregulate. Crazy how that works. I have seen this with friends of mine who get into, say, a marriage, and their alphaness and their charisma downregulates. And what happens is instead, they're focused on providing for their partner or providing for their family. It's quite fascinating. And they become a lot more serious. They don't really joke around that much. They become way more serious, and they get good at it. They actually start making more money. But here's the thing. There's a lot of things that go on there, and this is some pretty trippy stuff that I'm going to explain to you. So what then begins to happen is that their partner, their romantic partner or spouse, begins to meet with other people who are out, who are still alpha, who are still charismatic. And there's actually a double up effect here. There's two effects going on concurrently. The other effect is that if you yourself have a partner and you're financially invested in your partner, you might be a little bit jealous or insecure anytime that they're around other people. You're more invested. You take them more seriously. So you're a little bit more uptight, not quite as fun. But what happens is that when they meet somebody out who is actively meeting tons of people, and that person doesn't have all their eggs in one basket, because when you have a partner, all your eggs are in one basket. When that person doesn't have all their eggs in one basket, when you're completely invested in that and that other person isn't, what winds up happening is that for you, you're maybe a little bit more nervous around your partner, a little bit more serious because you've been working so hard. You don't have a lot of charisma. You're not feeling very alpha. And as a result of that, what's going to happen is that your significant other or romantic partner may not really see you in that same amazing light that they did initially. And that can also lead to things such as infidelity. It can create major, major problems, all because of this law of downregulation. Now, where this gets really crazy is in the event of a divorce. And in a divorce, you may have what's called an RAS flip. An RAS flip, essentially, like I mentioned, is where the person, they get basically a reverse halo effect. So in order to rationalize the divorce and leaving, they're probably going to zero in and focus in on anything negative that occurred in the relationship. So, I mean, look at this. Basically, you get into a situation where you have charisma-free and alpha-free intimacy. Then you get overly invested into that one person. Then somebody else comes along who's not invested and who has put their time and energy into having their eggs in many baskets and staying charismatic, and it creates infidelity. Now, if this surprises you, I got to be clear. In my experience, this happens continually. This is pretty much par for the course. And this is why I'm saying, even if you're going to get into a deep relationship, you've got to consider the fact that you can't just have your eggs in one basket. Now, from a practical standpoint, how might you get around that? It's easy. It doesn't mean you can't get into a marriage or a deep relationship. It just means maybe you still are social. Maybe you still keep up your general charismatic vibe. Maybe you go out and you meet new people. Just keep talking to people. A big one is do parties. Just go run awesome parties. Let your partner see you hosting some epic party and having all these friends and people into you. And what that does is it actually creates an evolutionary pressure in your partner to where they get more invested and they have competition anxiety, and it actually keeps the intimacy very exciting. It creates better, more exciting intimacy between you and your partner. So keep this in mind as far as the whole eggs in one basket element. It is huge. In the past, you might have heard me create this term called poison dripping. I've made this in other videos. I shot a video in Houston, Texas, where I talked about this. And poison dripping is the idea that when somebody's going to bring something to you on the front end, make you feel really good, and then take away your ability to handle your own life, your own emotions, basically going to down-regulate the skills that you've built and your habits and whatnot. When that happens, it's usually not going to be up in your face. It's usually not going to be something that they admit they're doing. They may not even know that they're doing it, if we're being honest, because their DNA is actually making them rationalize. The DNA is hijacking their thoughts and making them rationalize all sorts of different ideas that are in their selfish interest that they're not even aware is going on. They're clueless about it, in effect, because they're not conscious, which is most of society. So what we have from there is something called poison dripping, which essentially is like the frog in boiling water effect. So how does this work? Well, let's put it this way. Let's say you have a new romantic partner, and your romantic partner is insecure that you could leave, and your romantic partner is insecure that you could get someone better than them. They're not likely to say that to you. They're not going to say that to you directly. They're probably not even aware that they feel like that. In fact, a lot of it is unconscious, or it's in the awareness of the DNA, and the DNA has evolved methods and systems to keep you in place, but the individual is not even aware that they're doing it. So let's say, for example, you get a new romantic partner, and at first it's amazing, right? You feel just fantastic at first. Okay, it's going great. That's awesome. But eventually what will tend to happen is this. You would think that your partner wants you to be at a 10 out of 10 because your partner wants you to be the highest value version of yourself that you could be, right? You'd think that. Generally speaking, that's not going to be the case. Generally speaking, in many, or at least in many, many cases, your partner is going to want to regulate you probably somewhere between a 4 or 5 and a 7 and an 8. They don't want you to go lower than a 4 or 5 because that wouldn't serve them, but they also don't want you going higher than a 7 or 8 version of yourself as your best self, because that also means that you could leave or meet somebody better. So what you'll generally see is with your partner, if you get down too low, they're very, very reassuring. Now, in reassuring you, of course, that's a beautiful thing, and I don't want to be hyper pessimistic and take any kind of assurance in a negative way, okay? So please don't interpret it like that. But also be aware that there is an interest there to make it to where you're not able anymore to regulate your emotions when you get below a 5, right? So as you go below a 4 or a 5 and your emotions down to a 0, if your intimate partner is there to help you through it, that's made it to where maybe through physical touch or through emotional reassurance or coddling you, you've lost your ability to handle, the 5 to a 0. Now, at the same time, if you go below or if you go above, say, a 7, that also might scare them. So what you'll see is they'll start pouting. You might see it where you go out with a big group of your friends and you're doing things that, in effect, spiritually renew you, right? There's these things that you do that spiritually renew you. So I've had relationships like this where, there's like this one big meal that I look forward to every year. And right before that meal, the person who I'm dating will start to cry or freak out. Or I've had it where I have an intimate partner who, when I'm having the worst time ever, so beautiful to me and incredible to me, but then maybe we would spend a day going to the spa, going to a restaurant, touring the city, and on those days, consistently, the person who I was dating or in a relationship with would throw a temper tantrum. And if you actually do the net math on it, I want you to think about this for a minute. What you're always trying to do is to feed your soul, feed your spirit, feed your state. And as you're doing that through your day-to-day life, through people being really nice and friendly to you, loving to you, through you being on your mission, you maybe having a party with your friends, you laughing, you having fun, this builds your state. And as your state builds, it makes you more attractive. Remember I said earlier that people who come from individualistic societies, if they've been able to, say, focus on themselves and building themselves up, they go into a collectivist-based society and, where they haven't had a chance to do that as much, and they just go there and they clean up. It's ridiculous. Well, your partner knows that when you're in state, you're going to have a lot of people attracted to you, right? I mean, you probably had a night where you went out, you had fun with everybody, you had way too much fun. At the end of the night, you go to a restaurant, and anybody who you see who you might want to date or attracted to is just jumping over to your table, throwing themselves at you, and you're thinking, what's going on? I'm on fire. Well, you built your state. This state building is not just something that you build on a night out, though. You could if you want. I mean, I do it all the time. It's awesome. But at the same time, it's also something that you build in life. That's how you build your stable version of your state. So that being the case, your partner, if they see that you're doing something to renew yourself, they might just pout a little bit. And you're like, babe, I love you. What's wrong? And they can't quite identify it. Then they use their reticular activation system to find something selectively to focus on to create a problem, right? And in effect, what they're doing is that you want to be living your life in a state of released muscle, presence, joy, and not taking anything too personally, not getting too down when something happens. The idea of control muscle, it's a contraction, is that it gets it to a point where they become reactive and trying to control, and they're trying to control you or trigger you. And then you get to a point where you're in control, and then the control, it becomes reactive against each other. That's why I was saying in a free society, we want to get it where if, some idiot is saying something terrible, we want to just view them as a big joke. If we get triggered and then we feed them with we're triggered energy, then it confirms their identity as significant. We want to make idiots who are saying horrible things insignificant. You want to make it where if you're dating somebody and you're close to them or in a relationship with them, if they're getting mad about things, we want to just view it as a joke, view it as fun. Don't view it as too significant. Just say, oh, I love you. Come here. Tickle, joke, fun. And then maybe find a quick solution, move off it, and keep having joy, right? Fast conflict resolution. But in that mode, they may not let you have that quick conflict resolution. So what I want you to be aware of, in addition to the fact that you may have a situation where you're basically being down-regulated by something that's, you've got in effect, you have all your eggs in one basket, and you're being down-regulated by anything from social conditioning, like what we talked about, to new technology, to foods that you might eat, to drugs and things like that, steroids, melatonin pills, any of these things that could down-regulate you. Be aware that in most cases, you get the positive end up front, and then you get down-regulated later. Like I said, if you study energy work, this is thousands of years of insight here, but not really well understood in modern society. I've covered it a little bit here. I've covered it in other videos. In energy work, in effect, what you have is that we get the value on the front end, and that opens us up and makes us vulnerable. If you have a new intimate partner, for example, the first 3 months is a honeymoon period. Now, you've been just enjoying life. Everything's been going great. But all of a sudden, you get this new intimate partner. You're having physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. It's like you're in heaven. It's like you died and went to heaven. Well, what's going to happen then? You're going to start to rely on them, and you're going to need them. There's a need. But what that's doing is, if in effect, it's like you go up, like this until you've had so many beautiful moments together, so much positivity, so much love, so much joy, that you go clink, you need them. It goes like this, up, clink. Right at the clink, that's when the low vibration energy comes in and zoom down. So again, up, clink, down, right? We see this with, again, even with things like new technologies, up, awesome, clink, need it, zoom down. They start giving you marching orders, telling you what to do. Your life becomes a nightmare. So understand that this is why, to prevent that, the low vibration energy can detect when you have other options. The low vibration energy can detect when you've gone up, but you haven't gone clink. So what you want to do is you want to enjoy these beautiful things, have fun with them, let it go up, but still not need it. You don't need it. By keeping that boundary there, what is known as a healthy boundary, by keeping other options open, what that does is it creates a situation where the low vibration energy knows, not going to happen. How do we know this? Read any book on borderline personality disorder, for example. Which is basically a personality disorder where people just unload on people and can terrorize people in their lives to almost the point they kill themselves. Well, look up borderline personality disorder. It's crazy. There's a book called Stop Walking on Eggshells or I Hate You, Don't Leave. What is the hallmark of these things? The BP, the borderline personality, will vent, at least according to these books, on the people that are close to them, the people who can't leave. They're actually very polite and cordial to people who can leave. But the people who can't leave, the person with the very dark personality disorder goes after them. So understand, what is borderline personality disorder? That is a medical term in the DSM for what in energy work we call low vibration energy. So what you want to be doing is you want to be creating a boundary there so that the low vibration energy doesn't come and get you, right? Again, if you're Hugh Hefner back at the mansion, back in the heyday, people know that you're not going to tolerate being treated badly. So you're going to get their best side. This is the general idea, is that people they'll do their kind of tantrums and these sort of poison drip, very subtle, very covert ways to poison drip you. They do this when there's no boundary. The key thing to realize is that once you're in it, like a frog in boiling water, you can't even remember why you're in it anymore. Think of relationships you've been in where at first it was so beautiful, you have so many amazing memories, but by the end of it, it's become so toxic. You're not, all the things that you were in it for in the first place aren't there anymore. And that doesn't mean you can't fix it. I actually do believe that with either, the right counseling or will, relationships can be fixed. I've actually had relationships that became low vibration energy circuits between me and other people, and we did fix it. So I don't want to take away from that. But at the same time, understand the way the low vibration energy is working is it's continually ebbing and flowing. Okay, in some terms, in the DSM, for example, they call that gaslighting. Okay, gaslighting is where you pull the person in a little bit and then you hit them with all these false accusations and make them feel like they've done something horribly wrong. And there's a pushing and pulling with low vibration energy where it pulls you in to the point that goes clink, boom, beats you, you hide away. It pulls you back in, beats you, you hide away, and eventually, when the low vibration energy realizes that it has, in effect, your self-esteem has been robbed, has broken your boundary down to where there's nothing left of you, then it does what's called the discard. The low vibration energy is doing, in effect, like a math calculation. It's saying, when can we hurt them the most? When can we create the most death and pain and negativity? And when it sees that there's just nothing left of you, because what it does is it pushes and it pulls. It pushes and it pulls. It uses poison dripping. Sometimes it has major episodes, sometimes minor episodes. And then it keeps giving you what you need, which then down-regulates your ability to handle your own emotions. And then boom, 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 until you're an empty shell of what you once were. You get to the point where you totally couldn't attract anybody else. You need them completely. They're your worst pain, but you're addicted on them. You can study this in abuse cases. And then, in effect, what happens is that, boom, they do the discard right at the end. At that point, ironically, the person who was the victim here may wind up even engaging in self-harm or committing suicide, ironically, when they're being left by the person that was hurting them the most. Because they've completely down-regulated their ability to handle their own emotions, and then they leave them right at that point. Right? It's almost like a drug where, you're taking heroin, it's killing you slowly, but then you can't even function without it, and then they just pull it away from you and you die of, in some kind of detox. So we've got to be aware of this basic phenomenon, okay? So I think we've hammered a lot here on a lot of different areas. This video's been all over the place. I apologize for that. I'm doing my best. Truly, I'm doing my best. And I've hit you with a lot of different areas that may trigger you. You may have different opinions. Feel free to strongly disagree. Again, release muscle. It's okay to disagree. We can still be friends. I'd even still love to work with you and do coaching with you on other topics that you do resonate with me on. So I'm just putting it out there. We're in release muscle. If you didn't like what I had to say, release it. If you don't agree with me, I release that. Still buddies, okay? We're still friends. Don't worry about it. Just let the ideas marinate, maybe over a couple of years. No need to agree or disagree or even to form an opinion. Just throwing it out there. Just hope you enjoy it. But basically what we've done here is we've covered many of the different ways that you can be down-regulated, why you need to not have all your eggs in one basket, and what we'll wrap with is what life can look like when you have this down. I said that I would wrap up with talking about synergies that can be win-win, and there's definitely many of those. And here's what I would say about that. My friend Julian, he got married recently. And so in hearing what I'm saying, you think, oh, does that mean that you could never get married? Julian is somebody who's been on a great journey, a journey that you may have a hard time understanding. I mentioned earlier in this video some of the extreme things that we've been through, some pretty heavy stuff. Pretty heavy stuff. And Julian's been through that himself. He's been through an incredible journey. He's been through the highs, the lows, all those crazy things, all those ego trips, the fame, the money, attention, all that stuff. And in my view, and I'm speaking for him here, so he'd have his own take. I'm just saying my perception, which could be a mistake. In my view, he's very much more connected to his spiritual side at this point. And guess what? Do you remember earlier what we talked about with low vibration energy? In low vibration, everything is a zero-sum game. There's always that huge risk of that RAS flip where the person just focuses in on the worst qualities of you and doesn't appreciate you. There's all these risks and things that pretty much always happen. Or if you're not maintaining your status, they all of a sudden just lose interest and things like that. And that never entirely goes away because we do live in a physical world. But understand that when you bring high vibration energy into something, there's a win-win there. That's the energy of creation. It's no longer a zero-sum game. The only acceptable outcome in high vibration is a win-win. High vibration is the creative energy of the universe. It is light, playful. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It doesn't get triggered. High vibration energy doesn't get triggered. It's expansive. It's sharing. It's playful. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's not us against them, this little group against that little group, and everyone mad at each other, walking on eggshells and afraid of being triggered and feelings getting hurt. It's not like that. It's just fun, rising, moving up, light, playful, loving, infinite, abundant, sharing. Just imagine, like almost like a lava lamp, but this lava that's just expanding and growing. Look at our universe. Look at the size of our known universe. Just look it up on video. Look at it. Look at our universe that we live in. Just sitting here at Yosemite with the view you see here, this is like a tiny crevice on one of an inconceivable amount of planets. That is high vibration energy. That's what we're made of. And not all of us are just in the physical. For some of us, we hit a point where we will surrender to that high vibration energy, let it move through us. And in doing that, the creativity becomes infinite. Things like, oh, how do you keep talking and talking? Or how do you come up with a business idea? It's moving through you. That's what I'm trying to connect you to that. There's a physical world, but there's also the energetic world, where instead of everybody being against each other, we're one and we can come together. That's what I want to share with you. So in Julian's case, he did get married. And I don't know how that's going to turn out because anything can happen. But he got married because he's with somebody who has that too. And it's so often in conversations about dating, people will think they have to marry an Instagram model or something like that. You can do that too. This can be awesome, but it's about the quality of the person and the energy moving through them and how you can come together. And there's many people who I've worked with for many years who are great influences on me and have very powerful synergy with me. And there's many conditionings and books that I've read that have empowered me and allowed me to grow. You, as an audience, have given me the will to make this content and these videos. So we can share that together. To get that power that we're talking about, you have to be connecting to the ultimate version of an influence, which is your higher self, your higher power. And that will take you out of this need for a zero-sum game. No one has to lose for you to win. The only acceptable outcome is a win-win. And that's what I want to see for you. And there's many other people and influences and books and food that are in high vibration that you can connect to. You don't have to call it high vibration, call it whatever you want. But you can learn to see that. Is it expansive, growing, sharing, free, playful, light, free, freedom, 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 freedom. It's in release, expanding, moving up, sharing. We talked earlier about collectivism. You don't always have to force that. We can move together into a point where that would happen on its own, in freedom. That's what I do every day. I don't need someone to put a gun in my head to do that. It's something I want to do. So that's what I wanted to share with you here today. Realize the influences that you're connecting to. Don't put yourself into situations where all your eggs are in one basket. But in certain places where you find something truly beautiful and you have a sense that you can connect to that, that is something that you can double down on. And in many cases, something you can trust. So I want to thank you. It's been amazing being here in Yosemite. I shot a great video here in the past I'm so proud of. And it means the world to me, for you to be here with me to share this with you. We've gone through a lot of weird stuff. And it's okay if you don't understand it or disagree. But just let it be a seed. Just let it marinate in your mind. It's okay. We can all have our own opinions on things. That's beautiful. That's we're in a free society. Isn't that amazing that we live in a free society where we can do that? Isn't that cool? And we can be friends. We can come together and share. So thank you so much for being a part of this with me here today. What a great day. What a great day. Thank you. And I've got so much more to share. I'm so excited to dig as deep as I can to take you to the next level. We can move there as a team together. And I'll talk to you soon. Peace.